Well, you could go back to 1913, and that's when the Federal Reserve Act was passed, and it was in the Wilson era, and that moved us into the progressive era of constant wars and welfarism and runaway deficit. But it really started before that. It's this battle over central banking occurred with Jefferson and Hamilton, and the first bank was allowed to expire, but they tried to get a second bank, and fortunately Andrew Jackson was around, and he vetoed that, and it wasn't followed up. But they quickly incorporated, the whole idea of having a central bank into the Federal Reserve Act, which there were a few people, talking about it and opposing it, but I think it was passed, on midnight at Christmas time. Yeah. So it was all shenanigans, and it just, you could date. Now, there are two things that people could date major changes with monetary changes. That would be the establishment of the Federal Reserve, but also August 15th, 1971, with the bankruptcy, and where we went off gold absolutely, completely with everybody, and that was when gold was supposedly $35 an ounce. That's when I had been interested in the issue, but I said, this is a big day. But I only could find one other person in my hometown that even had the vaguest notion about what was going on. But all my concerns have come about, and I think we're still just barely into the complete dissolution of what's going to happen with the changeover from this funny money system to something more constitutional. Well, I'd advise they read the Constitution, and I advise that they study Austrian economics and find out why monetary policy is so important. And if you want to live in a free society and limited government and not constant wars, you have to know about this. So the evil emanates from the fact that we have fiat money, and unfortunately, in some ways, we have been blessed, especially since World War II, of having a society very, very wealthy, very, very rich, very, very strong with the reserve currency of the world, and very, very aggressive in building an empire. But all empires will go away and they'll dissipate, they'll fall apart one way or the other. And I think we're seeing the cracks on that. The BRIC nations are talking about it. And so we've aggravated a lot of people over the last 20, 30 years with our aggressive foreign policy. And of course, our badgering people. You do what we tell you, I will punish you financially, or we will bomb you if you don't listen. Yeah. And I think people are getting tired of it. So I would say the new administration has a real challenge when some of these things come to light. I'm against the Fed. I want to abolish it. But people say, well, you talk more about auditing. I said, well, that's the step you have to do to get the public in support of it. And we do have a lot more support in the conversation about the Federal Reserve from the time I went to Congress in the 60s. And people are interested in it, but because once they have an audit, they're going to find out all the mischief, and they'll be amazed what they've been getting away with. I think of all the international financial emergencies they have. You can't find out exactly who did what when, but they pull it out fairly often. But one of these days, they won't be able to pull it out just by creating more credit and it's making people satisfied. I think one of the reasons that's happening is we are very wealthy. We don't have a sound currency, but the rest of the world hasn't done very well at finding a replacement, even though they're starting to talk about it. I think we move constantly toward Venezuela and Zimbabwe. Eventually, the end stages go very rapidly, when people rush out of the dollar system. I don't think it's going to happen next month or so because the other countries, we've made them dependent on us. But there's going to be some incident, and it may, because we're constantly aggravating people with our foreign policy, whether it's in Ukraine, which we finally are getting a little bit tired of, and look how long it took us to get tired of Afghanistan, and look how long it took us to get out of Vietnam. And that lingers, and that has to stop because the people finally get sick and tired of it. And I think they're getting there, but I think there's a lack of understanding. That's why I really emphasize the fact that we need a new generation of people, and why I was so pleased with our national campaign that a lot of young people understand inflation a lot better than the people I knew in Congress. This establishment of the committee to get rid of waste, fraud, and inefficiency of the government, I think it's very good. And they have two good people that know and understand it. But the one thing that bothers me is we've had many votes in the Congress to pass a bill that says we have to get rid of waste, fraud, and inefficiency. Well, I voted for it because you should work for that. But it doesn't work. I mean, the whole thing is, it's not the lack of somebody that knows what the interest rate should be and how the money should be spent. They do not realize that they don't know what to do. And governments, by nature, are inefficient. And that's why you have to have a free market. You can't regulate and say, well, we need smarter people. Then you end up with everybody from the radical communist system to some people who say, well, no, we just have to have a lot smarter people deciding what the interest rate should be. And they don't know. They said it, even when the Fed does, and everybody looks at it, and 1 hour later, the markets move $10 billion or trillions of dollars. Yeah. And then a couple hours later, it's reversed again. So I am very, very biased toward looking for answers through the promotion of liberty and voluntarism. It's imperfect, but I'll tell you what, it's a lot better than everything being determined by authoritarians. The ultimate goal is to clean up our mess, is to get rid of this wicked monetary system, which is a tax system. That is, get rid of the Fed. But as a preliminary step, at least come out in a couple of years, we ought to be able to handle, leaders like this to say, we need to know what's going on. And I would say, just add another item to that list of auditing. How about the Pentagon? Just think of the Pentagon and all the spending that goes on. This whole idea that you have to be patriotic and support all these wars and you have to bow to the military because they're our heroes. Well, I'll tell you what, it's an illegal thing. It's not national defense. It is not there to define a national defense. It's designed there to serve the interests of very powerful people, and many of them are in the military-industrial complex, and they have a lot of clout. Gold is golden, and gold has a record. That's why when you come up with another new scheme that I don't understand, and it may appear that the people are interested in it, I say, I look at history, and not only did they have the coinage more than 2,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, they understand how important gold was. And I would say that I like that history and how long it's lasted. And I think that tells us. And what I watch most, that I think has the most direct effect on the marketplace, is the price of gold. And that reflects spending, and that reflects deficits. And they hide deficits, they do everything else, and they cheat. The Federal Reserve doesn't tell you what they do when there's a crisis, but it's a system that works, and the deficit is a big deal. I should say it because a lot of people are hopeful, and I'm hopeful too, that this administration will do better. But the politics of it, they're very sincere and they're very capable. I think the market's going to take care of it. There will be a liquidation of the debt, and there will be a liquidation of the mail investment, but it will be done by runaway inflation and making the dollar worth less and less on a daily basis. Well, the markets do what they have to do. Yeah. We're past the day where you won't see when the gold exploded in the 70s, it went from 35 up to 800. And I think there's no reason why people shouldn't say, well, you know what, it will be nothing like that. Maybe it'll go up 10, 20, 30% or something. I think you're going to see it double, triple, and quadruple if we don't do the right thing. And that's why I hope those who want to cut the spending and tie it into monetary policy, they have a very important job, and I wish them well. I think it'll naturally go back. I think a few people will go back. I think of myself in a sort of a silly way. I'm on the gold standard. What I do is I try to, if I have properties that, could be blown up by a storm or something, I'd like to protect what I own by something that they can't devalue. See, I thought in 1975, one of the best victories we had, we re-legalized the private ownership of gold in this country. Can you see that? 42 years it was that we weren't even allowed to own it. So back then, I said, more than half of my life, we weren't even allowed to own gold. So in 75, it opened up the door. So in many ways, people have, and I see that a lot of people are now trying to get people to realize the stock market's high, this is a chance. Gold is not booming at the moment. Maybe this is at the time that you prepare for that, because I believe there will be a day when you will see gold double and triple once again. I think they should, and they're recognizing its value. I want to just keep it legal. Competing currency should be legal. And we've worked in the states to try to get the states not to have sales taxes or capital gain taxes on gold coins. Why tax money? I just legalize it, and the people will take care of the rest.